Just waiting for everyone to show up. Silvio, I don't think your mic's on.
We open up with a technical bit.
Good job.
Welcome everyone to the first virtual CSides that we're on.
We had this all practiced. Silvio was going to do the intro, but then he had no mic, so I'm just sitting there in silence. But yeah, I think this will be good.
We have actually been running CSides or monthly meets at the ANU since 2013. So we've done about 8 years of meetups face to face. We've never streamed before, but of course we are in interesting times, so we have to adapt or die. And we want to keep on with the technical talks. CSides is all about the technical talks. We've had 2 talks a month for the past 8 years, and we focus on the technical side of things. And we appreciate people submitting talks to us and getting an opportunity to speak, whether they're new or they're old.
So we have some great talks lined up tonight. We have Dan Kennedy and Silvio, and we're going to finish up with a bit of a closing ceremony for the B-Sides Canberra 2020 that never happened. But I think first off, we'll kick off with Dan Kennedy. And Dan isn't one for introductions. When I said I'll intro you, he was like, oh, no need. But we'll do a small intro. So Dan is currently a senior threat analyst at Mandiant ThreatPursuit team, where he researches, hunts, and creates adversarial tradecraft for emulation. He also spoke at the first B-Sides Canberra back in 2016, which was great. And so been a long supporter of B-Sides Canberra and CSides. Yeah, Dan, would you like to start your screen?
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. And let me just get set up. It's great to be back with the B-Sides crew.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, share screen.
I have to say, during CSides, I was saying I normally sit down the back of the room and let Silvio just run it.
So I often say very bad jokes.
so having the camera, not so cool.
Excellent. So I'm hoping that that screen looks good for everyone on the stream.
Yeah, it looks great here.
Awesome. So yeah, just this talk today is purely just to introduce a tool that I've been working on for the past couple of months now. This talk is mainly an introduction, how to what it is, how to use it, how to install it, and leave some of the more depthier aspects of threat intelligence and analysis for a later piece. So with that in mind, otherwise I obviously turn out like this guy on a live stream, which I want to avoid, especially if I'm not getting paid for it. But a bit about me. So I'm a senior analyst at Mandiant within the ThreatPursuit team. So I mainly look at commodity malware, perform hunting activities, but my main focus has been adversarial emulation. In my spare time, a bit of jiu-jitsu, fitness, and being a dad, which occupies almost all my spare time. Yeah, and I love what I do, and I think I'd love to continue doing this sort of thing into the future. So with that in mind, the basis for the VM is to run on a Windows environment. There are plans to make that into a Linux-based version. So we're aiming to get that towards the end of this year, but it's primarily focused towards cyber threat intelligence. So designed, for your blue teamers, for your analysts, and even students to have sort of a neat tooling ready to use and easy to sort of install and move around. So the VM itself, for me, I felt was filling a gap that I saw wasn't really being met. So I felt that we're starting to move into an area where we're obviously dominated by data, and we need to be able to discern that data to find evil in sort of better and clever ways. So for me, it's, you know, these points on the slide are kind of the key themes or the drivers for me to create this VM. So I can enable others to both, you know, hunt, share their information in better ways, and to help, you know, guide and inform, you know, decision makers. So the sort of problem areas that we're looking at for the reasoning for this VM, which is what I've sort of observed through feedback from different organizations, different users, different analysts. And they all have sort of the key themes around, you know, the scope and the resources and, you know, the cost to associated with certain feeds. And that's all fair game, but essentially this tool provides you with, you know, some open sources so that you can collate and pull back from a large range of different providers, but also give you the sort of tool sets to be able to do that. So, and the other reason obviously is the, you know, evil is increasing. So, you know, in terms of the rate, especially this last couple of weeks with COVID-19 based themes, that has just been extraordinary. And obviously Emotet up until that point. And obviously the variancy as well. So they're coming in hard and fast. They're changing quite quickly. There's new samples, new things each and every day. And I feel that it's important to keep track and tabs of those, the sort of life cycle of some of those of malware and actors. And obviously to use and leverage that information further to, you know, support and guide how, you know, you can potentially anticipate and respond to, you know, future scenarios that you've observed in other areas. So taking, for example, you may have seen some indicators from a particular country targeting this industry vertical. So being able to sort of consume that intel quite quickly, rapidly, and then develop sort of signatures and apply those in a quick manner. I threw the attribution line in there. I know it's a sort of always a contested point, but it's becoming more and more important, not just from a law enforcement perspective, but also from, you know, sort of a regulatory perspective as well. Demarcation. So the VM itself is primarily focused towards threat intelligence. So it should not be used for incident response. It's a different methodology. It's a different mindset completely. Reverse engineering, there is some RE tools built into the tool set, so mainly for static analysis, but obviously Flare VM exists for that very purpose. So, you know, hit those guys up for your malware needs. And obviously the offensive security space, you've got Commando VM. So this just sits in that same family, and is the sort of the lonely child to a degree. But I love it. So yeah, we'll keep on with ThreatPursuit VM. The hardware prereqs. Now this is a pretty beefy box. It can be installed not just in a virtualized sense, but on a physical box as well. But inside a VM, there are quite a few tools that I'll go into shortly. But you will need a pretty high spec box to run that. Especially the graphics card and the virtualization counters enabled, so that you can take advantage of some of the Docker-based containers and their requirements. The minimum spec will just get you by, so you'd be looking maybe at running 1 or 2 applications inside this VM. So with the collection side, so when I think of obviously what we do as analysts, whether we're addressing a particular need or a problem, or we're validating a narrative, it's important for us to sort of work within a life cycle. And so with regards to collection, you can either take the targeted perspective, where you're looking at a specific problem or an indicator, versus bulk scraping and pulling back. So you just have to be mindful of what your approach is, what your needs are. But essentially, this tool should be able to cover one or more of these areas quite well. So this is just a note around, like, you can have a tool, but if you don't have the right mindset, if you don't have the right sort of practice or methodology, then the tool's kind of meaningless. And I feel that a good analyst will ask the tough questions on things. So whether it's a finished intelligence report and you're looking at, I guess, certain inferences made from that reporting. So, you know, for example, the victimology or the targeting, you may want to ask some tougher questions. Well, do we really agree with that component? Is the technical analysis correct? What are the gaps? What did that report miss? And it's just important to kind of, you know, ask those questions, but also, and on the right-hand side, you've got an example of the diamond model, an image from Threat Connect. And it's just a way for you to have that analytical mindset and pivot from different aspects for something that you've seen. So if you're working on or you're supporting an investigation and you want to provide a level of intel or intelligence-led, you may choose to use something like a diamond model to infer or differ certain parts of information. So the stash, this is the part I guess everyone loves. So yep, quite a few things here on the left-hand side, collection and triage. Obviously, some things you'd be quite familiar with, others you may not necessarily be. But MISP and OpenCTI, excuse me, would be the sort of key components that I use, for example, to collect information and then drill into. But obviously, this is just a subset of what actually exists in the tool. There's many more providers there. Poland is in there as well. They've created a really neat tool and they've indexed quite a large range of malware. The tool's called mQuery, and I'll show you guys that a little bit later, but a good way to hunt for other samples. The analytics and data is probably where the core focus has been, and this these tool sets are primarily geared towards applying, analytical models into across data to sort of discern that for something that you might be looking at. So there are some components here that are sort of machine learning focused, allow you to build and develop and train models to apply across your data set, but also to sort of leverage from to check or verify your hypothesis for hunting. So for example, the Threat Hunter playbook has some pretty good examples there of events and indicators that you could use to then hunt for across your own data sets. Then you've also got Jupyter and Zeppelin, which are kind of notebooks used as interpreters for data, so that you can model and classify information quite quickly. But you also have Splunk and Elk in there, so quite a bit to play and leverage from. The adversarial emulation, so the two that stood out for me most were MITRE Caldera and the Atomic Red Team by Red Canary. And this is primarily focused towards running a mission in the offensive sense and then pulling the event information back from your emulations into your logging platform so you can drill into. So that's the kind of key why that exists inside the platform as well, is to leverage the domain expertise in the offensive security space and bring that closer to the blue team. Some utils that are in there. So the ones that are not mentioned here would be things like Floss, XOR search, like string search. Have a whole bunch of Unix tools and Flare VM binaries that are included in there as well as some virtualization, visualization tools. So Constellations, Cedoscape, and Neo4j. And these are just like the ones that I wanted to show on one slide. There's quite a bit more behind the scenes. The types of installs. So this is obviously the unattended install from source and the customized install from source are the ones that we recommend you do and use. But however, for the purposes of today's presentation, I've included a VM file that's just been freshly built that you can use as a preview version. The unattended install. So to run this tool, obviously you would need to have your VM already prepared. You can, if you don't, you can grab a VM file from the Windows developer website, and you can, I think it's around 60 days trial evaluation period. And then run a PowerShell script to remotely execute and download all the packages. I'll go through the install process with you guys shortly. The customized install, which is what I recommend. This is where you would essentially modify the profile.json file and remove the packages that you don't need or will use. And that way you can have sort of a smaller install base because it is quite a lengthy process. A lot of packages get installed as a result. All right, demo install. Bear with me one moment. I think the display might change. Yeah, there we go. It always happens on demos too. Oh my God, come on. There we go. So I'm just going to change the resolution so everyone can see. All right, the demo install. So I'll just run through that. This is obviously a pre-built VM that I've just created for the purposes of today. But I'll go through the unattended install. Power hell, that's right. It should just be install. Cool, so we got our neat ASCII art. Some requirements here, so you do need to have obviously an updated recently patched Windows version. It's just a check that we put into in the installer. You can choose to take a snapshot or not. You won't need to take a snapshot, I don't think, before installing. You will pump in your credentials that you need, and this is to handle the install, the reboot operations. But essentially, we'll just throw in anything here just for the purposes. So we use Box Starter, which allows us to bootstrap the installation. So all it is controls the reboot operations of the install, and checks which packages are installed, which ones are not. Are they an updated? Is that package still available? Is it not? So we just leverage Bootstrap. The packages themselves are downloaded from a distribution point called MyGet. The packages themselves are written in XML, which essentially are a reference point to the originating distributors, the vendors and the original authors, so from GitHub or from a vendor's website, and it attaches the licensing arrangements and the description, the authors, and things of that nature. So we preserve all that information, and we just simply download the binary from the originating site. What we do though is we ensure that the downloaded binary from the site is the same hash as the distribution provider for that version. And so we have checks in place to make sure that the binary hasn't been modified or altered in any way based on the hash checksum that it returns. So rest assured, those packages have not been tainted in any malicious way by anyone. So yeah, that's the theory at least. So I'll just go ahead and kill this because that is the install. That will just run for about 3 hours, download all the packages, do a couple of reboots, and you'll end up with this desktop. So With the desktop, we'll just do a bit of a drive around, show you a couple of things, where to find things, and then kind of leave you guys on your way to hunt stuff. So I guess first things first is you've got some shortcuts. So these will just refer you to some online sandboxes that you can use. You can use to both check your samples, but also pull back samples, and as well as Attack Navigator to go into that. To show you sort of, if you like, the tactics and techniques, a sort of matricy of information here that you might want to leverage as part of your reporting. But let's not get into that. So if we go into Google Chrome, we have some shortcuts here I've added in, some bookmarks. And so from here, you can find additional ISE sources that you can pull back from and contribute to. You have some other Intel feed providers. These are mostly free with limited use, is my understanding, but you can sign up and register and actively check and find things. You have an OS int stack here, which is more or less non-technical, but there are some references to data sets that you can leverage from, such as census. And you have Bitcoin forensics. So if you want to do check up some wallets, you want to obviously keep tabs on transactions, then you can do so here. And just some networking tools that are driven from websites, if that is your thing. So that's the shortcuts. No need to go further into that. You have a tools folder. In the tools folder, which is just a shortcut, it'll have some groupings of the different tool sets that you can go and drill through. There's quite a bit there, as you can see, and this is, obviously ground zero for this particular VM. The plan is to obviously continually update and improve that, getting feedback from the community. So yeah, they're all there. They mainly just point to a directory in ctools. And so within here, we have like basically the bulk of our data and our tool sets. So yeah, as I mentioned, the Docker, it's quite Docker dependent for certain things. So I'm just going to go ahead and just make sure that this is still up and running. Yep. So I've got the malware information sharing platform running inside this VM, as well as other tools. So we're just going to go and have a look around there, see what we can find. Just kind of a sort of a short workflow. Oh, yeah. Oh my God. I swear that's what I put in. Fat fingers, maybe. Yep, so malware information sharing platform. What I want to do is go into the feeds. So obviously, there are quite a lot of communities. It's still growing, I suppose, but there's quite a lot of community that exists currently that actively contribute via the MISP platform. So I won't go obviously into the depth of this, but I highly recommend everyone start using it. The reason is that it provides a good way to both collect information, which is what I primarily use it for, but also to sort of model and tag and verify things and contribute back. So it provides a nice sort of neat packaged way to do that. And we'll just go and remotely view the events that this provider is willing to share. And we see some cool stuff here, but this is obviously pretty old. So we'll just filter by the date. So again, this is pretty old, but in any case, for the purposes, we'll have a look at Remcos. So these are the tags that have been applied by an analyst from this organization. So we maybe want to go and just check whether that's complete, whether that's correct, whether we agree with the attribution or not. Attribution in the sense of the malware malware family. Okay. So the cool thing is we've got like a pretty well-structured data set here. We've got some artifacts dropped as a result of the execution of the malware. This is inferred from this provider, or perhaps written in their blog post. They've got some C2 domains, some IP addresses here, and they've also listed the phase of the attack lifecycle that was at, that particular artifact was observed in. And we've got some payloads. So he's calling it payload delivery, payload deliveries. So we'll go and just do a quick check of that hash. So we'll have a look at the MD5. Let's go into app AnyRun. So I've got like a quick link to a sandbox that we can go and verify the sample if you like, or submit. I agree to your cookies. Pump that hash in. See if we've got any known samples. Not in app AnyRun. If all else fails, just go into Google, throw that in. We've got a link here for Joe's Sandbox, another sandbox online. Actually, these guys are quite good. They do create YARA rules on the fly. And I suppose once this report comes up, we can go through and look in depth the different characteristics of the file, such as the execution behavior, the signatures, more or less. But we also want to, potentially take some of additional MITRE ATT&CK tagging there, or the make. Forget what make's abbreviation stands for, but it's another MITRE ATT&CK or MITRE framework for malware classification, which is probably more appropriate for malware. And then we got some other information here, such as the C2 callbacks and whatnot. But that's okay. Perhaps we could not find a sample. So from Joe's Sandbox, we could download the sample and triage that a little bit further. But let's say, for example, we only have a YARA rule to work from, and we want to find how many other samples are hit from that YARA rule. So I've stolen a YARA rule here from Florian Roth. Thanks, Florian. And what it's going to do is look for what he asserts to be Mimikatz or safety cats executed or decoded from a certificate, and obviously the actor has been using certutil to encrypt and decrypt a module of whatever it was they dropped on that Florian's been looking at. So I'm going to go into mquery. So I've cheated a little bit and I've already pumped in Florian's query, and that's come back with some matches here. So there is an API that you can go and hit up. But yeah, mquery was created from Cert Poland, and it contains an index of 1.6 million samples. So highly recommend it to use it. And yeah, I've got a couple of samples here that we can go and take the binary, just download that. Obviously try not to execute it, but it's probably just going to have some P headers and Windows functions of Mimikatz in there. So I'm not too worried. I don't really feel like going through it today. But yeah, it's a good way to kind of hunt for information so that you can sort of validate and verify whether you agree it's truthful or not. There's some other things that are in here. Obviously, you could do that with the Cape Sandbox as well. I think I actually submitted this file already. Yeah, we've got some YARA rule hits here that we can also leverage and pull the reporting back for and tag that up in MISP. Obviously, Kibana is also running. So I've just taken an APT29 dataset from the Threat Hunters playbook and pumped that into Kibana. So yep, everything seems to be running pretty well on this VM. And I'm just going to do like a quick visualization across the whole data set, just looking for like key event IDs, process ID, parent process IDs, and different threads. Obviously, this is like, you need to drill into this information a little bit more, but just provides a good way to obviously collate large amounts of data and start scrutinizing it a little bit further. Splunk also exists in this tool. I'll just bring that up. Take a little bit. Come on. I find if you press enter like 3 times, it then decides to work. Okay. That was the 3rd time. Yeah, cool. Cool. So I'm sure like everyone has, or most people have had a look at Splunk and or ELK, Elasticsearch. If you haven't, like definitely go for it. You can get access to those inside this tool as well as from those providers. There's a whole bunch of training material on how to use that from them as well. I highly recommend the advanced hunting APTs with Splunk if you're new to hunting and that sort of thing. But yeah, so essentially you could run your boss of the SOC in here as well, other data sets, as long as they're indexed and you're using it appropriately with the terms and conditions of the vendor. And then, obviously start querying away for your data. I won't go into that because I'm running a bit short on time. Let's kill that. Actually, how am I doing on time? Kylie, Silvio? I have no idea.
You're fine. Just keep on going.
Yeah, cool. All right. Nice. Well, what I'll do is I'll go through Caldera. Actually, I might go through Jupyter Notebook. So Jupyter Notebook is essentially just like a Python interpreter for creating queries. So for example, I would probably use this if I was looking at an ID, like some sort of IDS log or something quite small, and I wanted to get some quick information out of it without necessarily creating those queries or indexing that information. It might be limited to a sharing problem or that sort of thing. So I've actually created I've prepared a query based on the Mordor dataset, which is in C tools Mordor datasets, which has, like as I mentioned, sort of a whole range of files there that have already been taken from an adversarial emulation. And so with this, obviously, you'll need pandas and PD, which has already been included for you, and that will allow you to obviously look at data in a structured way. So in this example, all I'm looking at is event information, and I want to see the highest count. So I can drill into particular process IDs or event IDs, and then I've got a nice, neat, ordered view of what those events, the key events are that have the highest count. I can also tailor this query to then look into obviously the payloads that are attached to that inside the event data. So yeah, that's essentially for the tool. There's quite a bit more to it, but yeah, that's kind of it for the introduction.
You don't want to know how many times you practiced that clap.
That was a great talk.
That was fantastic. Thanks very much.
We actually do have some questions on the social media. So one question that was asked by someone on the Slack was, can they get a copy of the links from the slide deck, if that's possible, if after the talk?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll post it into the B-Sides chat, the download of the VM, and the installation script will be hosted on a GitHub page at FireEye, but that hasn't been released yet. I need to just check what the status is of that. I think it's just a time zone problem, but you will have access to the VM to download and run that as a preview. So I'll make sure that that gets posted in after this prezo.
And one more question. In terms of the social media, the OSINT integration that you have, do you have social media a linkage to that, or social media integration was one of the questions we got on the Slack as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole range of OSINT focused links to websites that are there. So do drill through those. They will relate to sort of LinkedIn profiles and sort of social persona related data or websites that collate those sources. So I could definitely recommend people go through and based on whatever need they have. Social media is such a broad area, but there is quite a few links there.
Awesome. And there's lots of clapping happening on the Slack as well. So yeah,
Thanks,
maybe
dudes.
you can go in and talk to people a bit more after.
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Yeah, that'd be
Thank
great.
you very much.
Thanks,
And
guys.
thanks heaps for
having me.
coming. Yeah.
Cool.
It's great. Dan supported us when we started B-Sides Canberra, now supporting us the first time we go virtual as well. Must have a lot of trust on us.
And we mentioned this also. If you do want to talk in real time, go onto the B-Sides Canberra Slack, onto the CSides channel.